Threads of the Past, written by Tanisha Ingram, narrated by Kim Pfeiffer. The fabric had a memory, and it was screaming. Brooklyn McLay pressed her fingertips into the denim patchwork crop jacket of her father's last design. The two-piece, a monument to his genius, hung like a forgotten galaxy in the center of his studio. To anyone else, it was a masterpiece, a cascade of stars and shadows, but to her, it was a history she could feel under her skin. She traced a seam and felt the ghost of his hands, the weary sigh he made when a stitch was perfect, the quiet determination that had built an empire from nothing. A bitter, cold sensation came next, the final panicked moment before his last breath on December 13th, 2016, a year after she graduated high school, a memory of a feeling. Her stepfather's voice, a steady river of scripture, broke the dream cloud. "That's a beautiful piece, Brooklyn, but it's just an outfit. You can't live in the past." The preacher stood in the doorway, a solid, unmoving shadow in a crisp white shirt. He wasn't malicious, not openly. He simply saw her father's legacy as a gilded cage, and her love for it as a spiritual burden. He always seemed to come in the studio and pray over it, like it was a spiritual warfare only he knew about. Her dad had promised her mother a world free of her husband's sins and a life of simple, unadorned truth, and he promised Brooklyn the same thing. He took a step into the studio, and the air shifted, turning thin and sterile. "Your father's life was chaotic, child. I want to teach you to live calmly." He started to pray. Brooklyn's hand tightened on the materials, and the fabric hummed, pulling her back. She was 5 years old, sitting on the floor of the studio, a vivid universe of fabrics and light. Her father knelt beside her, a bolt of silk in his hands. "Look, Brooklyn," he whispered, his voice a low rumble. "This isn't just silk. This is a story. Can you feel it?" He guided her tiny fingers to the smooth material, and she concentrated, feeling only the cool smoothness. "You have to listen," he said, a smile in his voice. "This one's a first kiss, soft and a little bit shy." She closed her eyes, and for the first time felt the flutter of a memory she hadn't lived by herself. She giggled. "It tickles," she whispered. The memory slipped away. The preacher was still talking, but his words were a distant hum. "My father's life was a masterpiece," she wanted to shout. She knew the preacher meant well, that he saw the fashion world as a trap. He saw the sequins, the velvet, and the gold lame as the trappings of sin, and the sorrow in her eyes as something to be prayed away. But a life of calm was a life with no storms, and her storm was what made her who she was. Her past wasn't a sin to be cleansed. It was a ghost to be understood, and she was not yet ready to forget. "Hey, baby girl," her mom, a fair-skinned, toned, shorter lady said, walking into the studio. Brooklyn turned to her mom and waved and walked out. "Hi, Mom," she mumbled, walking past her mom to her room. "What did I miss?" her mother asked her husband, giving him a kiss on the cheek. "You know, Brooklyn, just in Lynn's studio daydreaming again about this fashion world stuff," he said with a malicious smile, rolling his eyes. "Well, I wouldn't be so quick to shut down her ideas," her mom responded, walking to Brooklyn's room. She began to knock. All she heard blasting was "I'm the Best" by Nicki Minaj. She tried knocking again. She decided to call her instead. The music instantly stopped. "Yes, Mom." Brooklyn picked up, flopping on her king-size princess-style bed. "Open the door," her mom replied, knocking on the door. Brooklyn opened her double-room door to let her mom in. Her mom followed. "What are you listening to?" she asked, looking around the room. "Nicki, of course, to get my creative juices flowing," Brooklyn said with a slight attitude. "Are you almost ready for your college touring day?" her mother asked. "Yes, ma'am," Brooklyn said, grabbing her book bag and walking to her car. "Love you too," her mom whispered, closing her door. "Love you, Mom," she responded, knowing her mom said it low, but loud enough. She heard. She got into her jet black 2016 Nissan Altima with 5% tint, covered in Hello Kitty decor, from the steering wheel cover to the gas cap, which had a rhinestone Hello Kitty face on it. Heading out, 2 huge applewood tree-like black gates surrounded their house, sitting on about 3 acres of land. The gates automatically opened and closed behind her. She headed to pick up 2 of her friends. The girl's name was Tiana White, a tall, slimmer, brown-skinned young lady. The other was a boy who went by Cha, but his real name was Jeremy Stans. He was more on the heavier side, brown-skinned with a big personality. She picked them up. They only lived 1 road from each other. They headed to the college, blasting music and laughing. Pulling up into an orange and green-themed school with all of the other student drivers, Brooklyn parked in the first available spot. They sat in the car until their designated tour time. They walked to the main quad, where they were there to meet up with their tour group. While the group was large, Brooklyn and her friends, Tiana, Ashley, and Maya, gravitated toward each other. Brooklyn had always been drawn to fashion design, but her high school was in a small town with limited art programs. She had spent all 4 years in JROTC and had won writing awards, but she yearned for something different. She'd been a passionate writer since 5th grade, but her true first love was dance. "Welcome to Florida A&M University," the enthusiastic student guide announced. A long line of high school students stood ready to tour the campus. The guide led them to the School of Architecture and Engineering, showcasing the buildings and different programs. Some students started to lose interest and drift away. Brooklyn observed the impressive facilities, studying every detail, and eventually found herself daydreaming about being a student there. After the tour, the group received information on how to apply. Later that evening, Brooklyn rushed home to share the details with her mom. To no surprise, her mom wasn't home. She went to her room, shut the door, and pulled out her lavender journal. She didn't talk much about her feelings, but through her writing, she could paint a picture so vivid you could see it, taste it, and maybe even believe you were there. Brooklyn's journal. My college touring day was great. I wore a camouflage shirt from my dad's chosen collection, jorts and my favorite Sperry's. My dad would say my look was streetwear academia. After all the tours, I had to choose a major. I'm leaning toward the dance team, and the auditions I saw were funny. Some students left when they saw how complex the routines were. I've always been a dancer, but I'll take it. ROTC is great, but with a new chief, it's been interesting. I'm excited about this new chapter, but something still feels missing. Maybe it's because my mom is never home when I have good news, or maybe it's because all of her attention is on my brothers. As the only girl between an older and younger brother, I've always felt like the forgotten middle child. People think that because you can get whatever you want, you're set for life, but what you really need is love. A girl needs her mother to talk to without being judged. A girl needs a role model who loves her unconditionally like my dad. She needs her mom to be her biggest cheerleader, just like she is for my brothers. A girl needs someone to encourage her, to hold on when she feels lost and like letting go. Brooklyn started to draw and scribble with tears running down her face. In school and church, she was perfect to others. They loved her smile that could brighten up a room, her laugh that was contagious, her big but shy personality. But it seemed like at home, she couldn't get the time of day. They would think she locked herself in her room to daydream, but there was more behind the closing of the door. Behind that door was pain, sadness, loneliness, self-hatred, and an awareness of self-identity. So much more that was covered by a beautiful, bright smile. In other places, she covered her emotions with a mask of faith, but when she came home to those 4 walls, her world would shatter back to reality. "Honey?" Her mother called looking for her in her father's studio, but she wasn't there. Brooklyn was sound asleep after nearly crying herself to sleep. Her mother knocked on the door. Brooklyn jumped up, closing her journal and placing it back in her nightstand. "Yes, I was sleeping," Brooklyn finally answered in a sleepy, raspy voice, wiping her eyes. Her mother opened the door with Brooklyn's favorite chicken Alfredo and bread from Olive Garden. Brooklyn reached out her hands in excitement. "Thank you," she said, grabbing her food and drink. "Of course. Did you get to pick your last classes today?" her mother asked, watching her tear into her food. Brooklyn nodded. "Yes, I made the dance team," Brooklyn said with noodles hanging from her mouth. She didn't seem as excited as she first was when she found out. "I am so happy for you. Congratulations. Where are you going to be dancing?" she asked. Brooklyn gave a blank stare. "I'm not sure. I think basketball games," she responded. "Just give me the schedule. I will make what I can," her mother said, walking out of the room and shutting the door. Brooklyn knew her mom meant well, but she had never even come to watch Brooklyn play basketball in middle school. She played all 3 years, and her mom came to see her play once. Also, to her high school ROTC marching event, where she won Best Dressed in her uniform from an unknown captain in the Navy. Brooklyn finished half of her food, taking the leftovers to the refrigerator. She tried to tiptoe to the kitchen, but she couldn't help but notice her dad's studio door open. She put her container away and walked back to the studio. She entered the cold, silent, fabric-filled but empty studio. She walked around the room, her fingertips brushing against the variety of fabrics, the tip of the sewing machine, the edge of the model mannequin, pulling her back. "Birdos," her dad said in a soft, funny voice, coming around the sharp corner. "You know how proud I am of you," he said, hugging her with a huge grin on his face. Brooklyn's face, confusion at this not being a memory. "You know I've always told you, when it comes to you, you have to make yourself happy. You cannot depend on other people for your happiness, or you will always be sad and let down," he said, giving a speech that sounded familiar. "Brooklyn, your mother and I love you, and I am sorry I am no longer with you, but you always have me in spirit. You can always come to this room and touch a fabric or two to let me know you're calling for your guardian angel," his softly spoken voice said as it started to vanish. Brooklyn cried, wishing she had just a little more time. She rushed to the fabric wall, rubbing every fabric she could find until it gave her a rug burn. She noticed it wasn't working, so she sat on the life-size beanbag across from the fabric wall, anxiously staring at the fabric in confusion. The preacher walked past the studio and doubled back. "Maybe that's why it didn't work," Brooklyn thought to herself, looking to the side and seeing her stepfather in a full dress suit to go to Bible study. "Hey, Blake and I are going to Bible study. Would you like to join?" he asked, stepping into the room. The room's air tightened. You could feel the atmosphere shift. Brooklyn looked up at him and then looked back at the fabric. "No, thank you," she responded in a low voice. "I think it would be great to get out of the studio for a change and explore your gifts in ministry," he suggested. "No, thank you," she repeated, getting up from the beanbag and walking to the sliding door of the studio. She turned off the lights behind her, waiting for him to leave so she could close the door and return to her room. Blake and his father left, leaving Brooklyn and her mother home. Their mother was in the kitchen cooking and getting some schoolwork done. Brooklyn, on the other hand, was contemplating whether she should go talk to her mother or just let it go. She paced her room back and forth. She built up the confidence to go talk to her mother, opened the door, and overheard her on the phone. She hurried and shut the door, flopping on her bed. Brooklyn pulled her journal back out, opening to the page she had just finished. The page was almost full, with a tear stain in the center. She rubbed her fingertips over the page, reminiscing on the time her dad came to her school for career day and told the class she would be the next big thing in fashion. She wanted to follow in his footsteps, but the fashion business world was harder than she thought. Brooklyn felt lost ever since she lost her father. He had the best life advice and wisdom, and he made it easy to choose a life path. His favorite line was, "If you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life," in his soft, loving, and nurturing voice. So she thought to herself what her passions were and what she was good at. She decided to turn the page in her journal, starting on a fresh page. She wrote in big bubble letters, "Passions and what I'm good at," then put a line down the middle, drawing a curved line under each topic. She wrote about her passions. Writing. I have been writing since I was in the 4th grade, and I have found a passion in expressing myself through my words and stories. On the other side, it read, "Of course, I am naturally good at this without question." Dance. I have been dancing since elementary school as well, but I never really got the opportunity to be on a dance team like I always wanted. I found a passion in dance, expressing myself through movement and music. The other side read, I am better with getting a dance and learning it than naturally creating a dance these days. Fashion. I have always loved to dress. I got this passion from my dad and mom. When I was younger, I would stay up all night playing styling games like Star Dolls, My Scene, and things like that. So I started getting into styling and styling my school outfits, cutting some clothes, getting in trouble, but I never really wanted to be a business owner like my father. I saw the stress, but I did think about having my own clothing brand one day and never really acted on it, just dreamed. This comes naturally with my personal style. Brooklyn paused, thinking to herself. She walked to her closet, looking at all of her clothes, then walked to her desk of writing materials, then over to her 4 full body-length mirrors in the corner of her room, like a mini dance studio. I have a lot of passions. I have to choose one to focus on and what I love, not to make anyone else happy or proud, but to find my true outlet and purpose on earth, she said to herself, looking in the mirror at her reflection. She went back to her bed and journal. She continued to write until she fell asleep. Then she started to write affirmations, declaring God's grace and how He has a plan for her, over and over, writing Jeremiah 29:11 more than 200 times. Not only was she declaring it by writing in her journal over and over, she read it every morning for the next 2 weeks. The next morning, she noticed she was a lot more excited about the days to come. She was expecting good things to happen to her in her future. She knew if she kept her dad's advice in the back of her head, God first and in her heart, she could conquer anything and everything. The preacher was blasting gospel music, which woke up the entire house. Her younger brother Blake came busting into her room with an annoyed look on his face. She looked at him, then looked at the door. You don't knock? Brooklyn said, a slight attitude in her voice. Why is he blasting that music so loud and early on a Saturday? He complained. Brooklyn shrugged her shoulders, getting up to start her day. She and her brother normally would go to the mall, then to Cascades Park, which was a newly built park with a walking trail, waterfalls, a huge stage, and a restaurant. It was a nice little park they went to with their friends to walk around, talk, and play on the stage. They both got ready to head out of the house to do their normal Saturday routine. They headed to pick up Blake's girlfriend and Brooklyn's girlfriend. This was a secret between Blake and Brooklyn, or at least she thought it was. They headed to the mall and afterward to the park. They walked and talked for hours. The preacher always called around 9:30 p.m. to make sure they were heading back soon for church in the morning. This was the only time Blake and Brooklyn could be together and have a little fun before he would call over and over just to see where and what they were doing. They could just be driving around the small town and still get 1,000 calls asking what they were doing. Brooklyn was in college. Blake was a freshman in high school. You would think they would have a little more freedom, but they didn't. They both talked very strongly about their feelings to each other, but when it came to their parents, it was hard getting through. They treat us like kids, Blake said, hitting the back of the seat. There are middle schoolers going to parties, and all we do is go to the mall and the park. And they think we're robbing banks, I guess, Brooklyn said with sarcasm, rolling her eyes and putting her seatbelt on. Headed back home from their Saturday adventures to the mall and park, as soon as they walked in the door, there sat Blake's dad and Brooklyn's stepdad. They looked at each other and tried to walk to their rooms before he could give them a lecture. Do you guys see the time? He said, gesturing with his hand to his gold-plated watch. They both looked at their phones. It's 10 o'clock, Brooklyn said in confusion. He gave them both a look. 10 o'clock is too late to be bringing him back home when you both have to be up for Sunday school, and you're not going to want to get up, he explained, turning off his projector he used to watch preaching videos in the living room. They both walked to Brooklyn's room. She closed the door behind them, placing her index finger over her mouth. Blake walked to her television, turning it on and grabbing the PS4 controller. This is what I am talking about, Blake started to complain. He treats us like kids. I can't even go to the high school to play basketball, he continued, starting a 2K game as the Warriors. You? No, me. I'm in college, and I can't do anything unless I take you. Then I'm on a time limit because I have you with me. Brooklyn started to complain, scrolling on her phone. He wants me to be a pastor so bad. I preached one time, and that was because I felt I needed to say that, but I'm stuck between fashion, dance, and writing, Brooklyn explained in annoyance. You are good with fashion styling for sure. I would hire you. You are a gifted dancer, and your writing is really good. It inspired me to write a story about my life, Blake said, giving his sister compliments. She never knew that was how he felt. She smiled. Thank you, Blake. You're an amazing basketball player and should keep asking your dad. I talked to him too, she confirmed. Someone told him the high school wouldn't be good for me. That's what Mom told me, Blake complained. Probably one of her teacher friends or your dad, Brooklyn said with an attitude. Yeah, that's dumb to listen to other people. I'm your child. It's my feelings, he responded, playing the game, getting quiet and in his feelings from the conversation and the memory of his mother telling him he couldn't go to the high school because it might not be good for him. Being a young minister, Christian school was a better option. Brooklyn ran across a post that, in a way, triggered her anxiety, but also inspired her to write a short story. The post read, Being molested at a young age forces you to grow up fast. Some turn gay, have sex issues, bad attitudes, trust issues, love too hard, live in fear, etc. Some grow a shell, and others do anything it takes to be loved because most times we miss that part and don't understand and just want to feel wanted or needed because you don't know what you did to be hurt the way you were by a person who was supposed to love you. A family member or a family friend, or maybe somebody who just took advantage of you and you blame yourself for things that nobody can control. I'm a survivor of it. I struggle daily. I get upset. I love hard. I get hurt easily. At times, I'm very emotional. Maybe TMI, but I am not ashamed. I am a survivor. That post touched her in a way she couldn't explain, and she could only cry. Her father never knew what happened to her, but she did one day feel the need to tell her stepdad. At first, he was nurturing. Well, she felt safe and like she was in control, not them. Brooklyn was not only molested from the ages of 6 to 12, but it was, in a way, hard to explain. Her older cousin was 12 at the time. She was only 6, being exposed to an adult world. She was scared to tell anyone. How could you tell that someone manipulated you into doing something to them? Brooklyn gripped a nearby piece of clothing from her dad's collection, slipping into the horror flashback of the night it began. At her auntie's small, green-colored 2-bedroom apartment in Fort Lauderdale, little Brooklyn was with her big cousins because she loved hanging out with her girl cousins, since she didn't have any sisters. They used to have so much fun, dancing, listening to music, and watching 106 in Park music videos. This night was not like those other nights. Her older girl cousin decided to put on her mom's adult movies, which in any world would make kids or anyone excited in a way that wasn't appropriate for kids, and definitely not cousins. She decided to get a teddy bear from her room for her and her little cousin, and taught little Brooklyn how to hump on a teddy bear when you're anxious. Not only did Brooklyn watch, but she was confused and started to do the motions to fit in with her cousin. Not only were they in the room, but her little brother was behind them, watching the whole thing. After a little bit of that, the cousin fell asleep on her bear. Just little Brooklyn and her boy cousin were up. Little Brooklyn went to the kitchen to find food. She wasn't interested in what was on the television, and he followed. He went to the corner of the kitchen by the fridge and said in a soft voice, "Hey, want to reenact that scene from the movie?" Brooklyn looked confused, knowing that wasn't right. She said no. She didn't think they should do that, and that she was only 6. Then he responded with manipulation in his tone. "I will tell your mom you did it, and what we watched if you don't. Brooklyn became scared because she knew her mom wouldn't let her go back over there if she found that out. She was only 6 years old. So she got on her knees and reenacted what they watched. She felt dirty, betrayed, sad, and confused. Little Brooklyn went home that night and cried herself to sleep, not knowing what had just happened and how she could tell her mom. The memory slipped away. Brooklyn's face was covered in tears and sweat. Her brother looked back at her in confusion. "Are you okay?" he said, confused but also worried. "Did you hear what I said?" he asked, putting the game on pause and walking toward her. "No and no," Brooklyn said in a sad, defeated voice, slamming her face into her pillow and bursting into tears. "Oh man, what is wrong, Brooke?" he asked in concern, patting his sister's back. "Why would he do that to me?" she cried, looking at her brother. Blake had found out when Brooklyn finally decided to tell him one day when they were drinking and talking about their problems and home issues. "I don't know, B, but he will get his one day," he confirmed to her. Blake prayed for his sister. Being that he was an ordained minister, she believed everything he said and declared over her life. Brooklyn screenshotted the post she saw previously, wanting to expand on it. Brooklyn sat up, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Her father's words echoed in her mind. "If you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life." Her passions, writing, dance, fashion, flashed before her. Then Jeremiah 29:11. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." She had been searching for an outlet for her pain, a way to make sense of the past. Her journal was a quiet confidant, a place for her tears and fears, but the post she had just read sparked a different kind of fire. It wasn't just about writing her feelings, it was about sharing them, transforming them into something for others. In the words of her favorite writer, "You don't write because you want to say something, you write because you have something to say." F. Scott Fitzgerald. She pulled out her journal and opened to a fresh page, the lavender cover a slight contrast to her different thoughts. She began to write not about the day's frustrations or the silent house, but about the post. She wrote about the strength of the survivor's words, about the courage it took to put that vulnerability out into the world. She thought of her father, of the threads he had used to tell a story. He hadn't just made clothes, he had given them a voice. She wanted to do the same, to give a voice to her pain, to the silenced parts of her life. The words began to flow, first slow and halting, then with a powerful, steady rhythm. She wrote about the fear and the self-blame, but also about the hope of healing. The words weren't a way to hide, but a way to reveal a truth she had kept hidden for too long. She wanted to turn her pain into a patchwork of her own, a story that was beautiful and broken, but ultimately hers. She began to write a short story, a fictionalized account inspired by the post, weaving in her own experiences, but changing the names and places. She could feel the creative juices flowing, not from Nicki Minaj this time, but from a deeper, more painful source. She felt her father's presence, not as a sad memory, but as a guiding hand, pushing her to use her gifts. She wasn't just writing, she was building something, stitch by painful stitch, a new fabric with a new memory. The next morning, her mother woke her with a hug and the scent of pancakes. "Don't forget, it's Youth Sunday," her mom said, her voice soft. "Your brothers are already up." Brooklyn nodded and smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. She wasn't smiling because she was excited for church, but because of what was waiting for her in her room. Her journal was on her nightstand, a testament to the night before. She had found a new way to live, a way to combine her past with her present, to weave her passions into a new future. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was no longer just a victim of her past. She was an artist, and she was finally ready to tell her own story. The family ate, then got ready to head to church. The car ride that morning was joyful, filled with laughter and singing. "Have you thought about coming to a Toastmaker speaking class with me, Brooklyn?" her stepdad asked, ruining the vibe of the evening blues. Brooklyn looked at her brother and smirked. "No, but I am going to continue my passion and love for writing," she said with a huge smile on her face. Her mother smiled. "I am proud of you, baby. You are an extraordinary writer," her mother said, confirming her blessings. "Thank you, Mommy," she said in a happy, high-pitched voice. "I still have all of your newspaper writings, writing trophies, and so much of your writing materials," her mother chimed back in. Brooklyn chuckled. "I have to see that stuff again," she said, excited. "Of course. It is in your box. We can get it when we get home," her mother said, looking back at Brooklyn with a smile. "What about you, Blake? What's next?" she asked her son. He gave a blank stare at her and his father. "I wanted to play basketball, but I don't know now," he said in a sarcastic voice. Brooklyn chuckled, looking at her brother from the corner of her eye. "Why do you have to go to the high school to play basketball?" his father asked, looking at him through the rearview mirror. "Because they're good, and my little school doesn't have a basketball team," Blake responded, snappy. His mother looked at him. "I think we should give him a chance," she said, looking at Blake. "I think so too, Mom. He is really good, and this will get him out of his shell. Public school kids are different," Brooklyn added, pushing her brother slightly. His father started to become really quiet. They drove the rest of the way in silence. The atmosphere quickly shifted from joyful to quiet and anxious. They made it to church, and the vibes from the stepfather instantly changed back to joyful. They enjoyed their youth Sunday with Blake and Brooklyn as Sunday school teachers over the adult men's and women's classes. That was something they both enjoyed, the opportunity to teach the older men and women their interpretation of the lesson. Brooklyn also taught the little children before being promoted to the women's class. After Sunday school, they had refreshments in the kitchen area. They dismissed the morning classes, with each class having one person, or the whole class, state what they learned. They all had the same lessons, but according to their grade and spiritual levels. Each youth had a job for Youth Sunday. The youth did everything, from devotion to preaching. Sometimes the pastor over the church was kind of stingy. To singing, ushering, everything you can think of, even the announcements. Brooklyn sang in the choir. Blake played the drums sometimes, and most of the time he was on the pulpit. They enjoyed their Youth Sunday. Now they were headed to eat and to the movies. That was a surprise. They finally got home after their adventurous Sunday. Brooklyn ran to her photo box to see her trophies in the newspaper entry about her winning the Big Bend area 5th grade safety writing competition, where she won $100. It was so cute. It said how Brooklyn stated in her interview that she was going to use some of the money to get a new iPod and the rest to help her mom, like she had won the kids' lottery. "I can't believe your bang was flying like that in the picture, but I love how he interviewed you and came out to the school to get a picture and interview you personally before writing the article," Brooklyn's mother said in a proud, cheerful voice. "This was one of the best days of my life. I felt like a star at school. The kids were congratulating me and saying how good it was," Brooklyn said, so proud, holding her short story she wrote in high school called Mama Always Knows Best, about a high school girl who only had a lot of friends because of what she had and did for them. Her mom tried to warn her, but she thought her mom just didn't like the girls, until one day she overheard them talking about what they could get from her. Brooklyn aced that project, and it was used as the main example that year. The spark for writing started to creep up on Brooklyn like a thief in the night. She felt her heart pulling toward a full-time career as a writer. She planned to apply to her local college for the journalism program as her major and communications. She heard they had the best program in that field. She was excited to go to her new college and get her paperwork and school schedule. From her home church, she received not one, but 2 scholarships. One was from the Old West, and the other from her commissioner, Deacon Lamb. That would cover 2 years of college, books, and supplies, Plus, her student financial aid helped out a lot. Her brother Blake was finally allowed to go to the high school like he wanted, but he didn't play basketball. He lost his spark and love for it after it took so long. In his words, because he only had 2 years left, he felt cheated out of his dreams. Brooklyn started her short story about her life, but she made it into an interesting novel that will leave you in tears, but also had a happy ending. Brooklyn graduated in June 2015. She enjoyed her time off. Then it was time to hit the books. She had an 8 a.m. class. Why did she choose that? She quickly regretted it. She had a hard time finding her high school friends until she heard her name from a familiar voice as she was walking past the college gym. "Brooklyn, slow down," her high school best friend said, running to her side. She knew Brooklyn really wasn't an affectionate person, so she gave her best friend a side hug. "Hey, Ashley, what are you taking up?" she responded, hugging her best friend back, excited not to be alone anymore. "Personal training," Ashley said with confidence, flexing her muscles. She was a 5'8" slim, light-skinned girl. They had been best friends since middle school. "That definitely gives me you," Brooklyn said, laughing at her gestures. "What about you?" Ashley asked as they started walking to their first class. "Journalism," she said with confidence. "Oh yeah, that definitely gives me you," Ashley said, nodding her head. They broke off to their first classes. They both had 3 classes a day. After classes, they would go to the gym and play basketball, or either watch the boys if they were being stingy on both courts. Then they would work out, or go to the other gym and watch the actual school team, basketball girls and boys, practice. Then one day, Brooklyn built up the courage to ask her mom to get a job. All her other friends had one, so she thought it would be cool to get one too. Her mother told her the seriousness of a job and how she wanted her to stay focused on school. She just knew she could handle it. Brooklyn headed home, excited to tell her mom about her day. She entered the gates to their home, rushing to her room and pulling out her journalism class information and notebooks. She spread everything on the bed for her mom to see: her books, notebooks, an HP touchscreen laptop that turned into a huge tablet. She stared at her bed for about 5 minutes. Snapping back into reality, she went to her dad's formal fashion studio. She turned the lights on in the dark room, brightening up the fabric wall and other fashion supplies. Brooklyn rubbed her fingertips across the cold, slippery silk fabric in hopes of seeing her father again. The room began to turn cold, but comforting. "Dad, I just wanted to tell you I found my passion in writing, and I know I may have let you down, but I am doing what you have always taught me. Do what I love, and I'll never work a day in my life like you with your fashion. You were in love with it, and not just the money, because when you started, people laughed and you didn't get your first order until a week into your business. You didn't give up because you loved it, and that is my goal, to do what I love, regardless of the criticism," Brooklyn said, tears building up in her eyes as a memory started to take over her. "Hey, Booger Nose, I watched you graduate, and that was the proudest moment of my life. I am extremely proud of you and whatever path you choose to take. Yes, I wish it was fashion, but I cannot force my love and calling onto you. I always remember telling you not even I can stand in the way of your calling and what path you choose to take. I can only guide you to it and teach you how to keep it," she heard her father say in a voice that weakened her heart. She cried, then laughed. "How do you know what's going on?" she said, confused, but loving every moment of it. "The gift of God," he responded, his voice vanishing away. Brooklyn was no longer sad or in grief. She knew she was now back on the right path. She ran to her room, starting her first writing assignment for Miss Gina Henderson, who would become her favorite English college teacher in years to come. She was one of the teachers who used Brooklyn's writings and writing techniques for her classes. Miss Henderson grew fond of Brooklyn's writing and encouraged her to continue her writing career regardless of the ups and downs. That year, Brooklyn finished her short story and decided to take a break from school to focus on her writing. She created her own blog. Like her father, she stepped out in faith and started her own fashion. No, writing empire, and went not just national, but global. She started a personal blog for just her short stories and novels. One day, a huge publishing company reached out to Brooklyn for a big business deal. She had little knowledge of the contract. Her dad had great negotiating skills and was a lot more business savvy. Brooklyn asked her business owner, best friend, Ashley, who had her own skincare line, and it was huge in the social media world. Ashley helped her friend with the contract and what they needed to tweak before she would sign. Brooklyn became a published writer by the age of 31. It was not in her plans to be that late in life, but she knew everything had a designed time, and it was always the right time. Brooklyn appeared on multiple television shows and podcasts about her short stories and books. She was living not only in her childhood dreams, but in her dad's words. She never felt like she was at work when she was in front of thousands of girls, encouraging them that they are seen, they are heard. She slowly became the motivational speaker she had been running from. Her grandmother helped her finance the car of her dreams. Her stepdad promised if she couldn't pay those higher car payments, he would help her. She believed every word he spoke on the phone. About 5 years into Brooklyn living the dream she always dreamed of, she fell into the cycle of smoking and doing things that were not helping her grow. She was trying to fit in, which was always her downfall. Her stepdad decided to take the car because she couldn't afford the payments anymore. Brooklyn lost her publishing deal. She lost her luxury lifestyle, car, and so much more. She had to move back home and start all over at 32. Her dad's studio was gone. They downsized from their big house to a 2-bedroom apartment. Brooklyn's room and everything were gone, half in a storage unit. Her jewelry box was gone. Her bed was gone. Every memory was gone. You already know how the preacher reacted. He complained every day to Brooklyn's mom, but he didn't know she heard their conversations. He pretended to be nice to her, asking her to come on calls with him. He started his own mechanic business. He was a great mechanic. She was weirded out because everything her dad did, he did as well, but talked about it like it wasn't good. He offered Brooklyn a car after pretty much taking her car. She had to pay half of her check to him. She got paid weekly, only making enough to eat, not much to do anything after he took half of it. She and her brother Blake still went on their adventures, but Brooklyn had to pick up a side hustle. Cash rides in a college town were the best thing she could have started. She made extra cash to save at least for gas in her car. Brooklyn went to her brother's room, which she was sharing while he was back home. She found a piece of material she'd been holding on to from her dad's collection. She rubbed it softly, closing her eyes while laying on her soft but uncomfortable air mattress, drifting away into a vision. This is what I was trying to warn you about before my passing. The hard real-life times. How long did you think the act was going to stay up? I told you his sins will finally show. His sins will be unnoticed. He said he didn't care if you slept outside. We all fall short, but that is what a pastor says. Her dad spoke, anger and rage in his voice. Brooklyn became scared, looking at a figure that pretended to be her father. Yes, I know I didn't listen. I was stuck in my spoiled ways, Brooklyn said in a sadness, walking toward the shadow. It seemed to vanish, but she still heard it talking like her dad. You never called. You got stuck in that life. You forgot about me unless you were in my studio. That isn't me. I no longer live there, and you forgot about me. The voice responded softly, while a cold breeze came over Brooklyn. She cried in regret. I never forgot about my best friend. Life just became uncomfortable to bear with so much regret and materialistic items trying to cover the pain. Brooklyn cried to the empty room in her soul. My child, weeping may stay for a night, but joy comes in the morning. She heard a small, steady voice of God say, confirming her feelings. She cried harder, knowing it was something she had to change and do. She rolled off the bed onto the floor, not only praying, but declaring clarity over her life and her relationship with him. She felt something come over her. It felt like forgiveness, the grace of God again. Her sins were forgiven because this time she was genuine within her heart. Brooklyn pulled out her journal. She hadn't touched it in over 3 years. She read what she had written over the years. The last entry was about 2 years ago, about the car. She ripped the page, throwing it to the side. She once again turned to a fresh page. Brooklyn's journal. Hey, journal. I'm sorry I haven't been writing to you. I thought I lost faith and hope after everything started to fall apart. Then I realized it was all a test to see if I would keep going, or would I give up like most people. People talked. I lost friends along the way. They laughed and talked about my weight loss, even family, like it was an old-fashioned knee-slapping joke. But I learned I did nothing wrong on my journey, but lost my way trying to be someone I wasn't. I lost my way, but I am asking God to forgive me for my sins and shortcomings, asking Him that the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in His sight, no one else's but His. I wanted the world's approval so bad I forgot about God's approval, His will and His plan for my life. So He had to humble me and break me all the way down, just to show only He can pick me up again. She wrote in tears once again, a huge teardrop dropping in the center of the page. That teardrop opened a new beginning of letting go of the past. Brooklyn went to her mother the next morning, stating that she wanted to branch out on her own and learn the ropes of life, not with her mother or father or even grandmother being able to step in and help. She cried to her mother. Her mother cried in regret of not fully teaching her only daughter the ways of life, but only what she knew, to depend on her mother and father. Brooklyn and her mother had a long conversation before her stepfather walked in, shifting the atmosphere like he was known for. "Did I interrupt something?" he said in sarcasm, looking at Brooklyn's mother. "We were just talking, but it can wait until the morning," her mother said, rushing Brooklyn out of the kitchen area. Brooklyn rolled her eyes and walked to her brother's room, laying on her bed and opening her journal. She continued to write her way to sleep. The next morning, she woke up for a normal day at work. To her surprise, she ran into an old publisher from the company she used to have a contract with. He surprisingly greeted her with a smile. "Hey, Miss McLay, I hope you are still writing. You have such an incredible gift and should be worldwide," a short, stubby white man with curly brown hair said, scanning in his lottery tickets and giving Brooklyn a blank stare. She looked back at him in confusion, but happy he said what he said. "How? If I got fired for a stupid drug test someone told them to take? Because they don't normally do that, and all they found was marijuana?" Brooklyn cried, trying to fight her tears. He handed Brooklyn his winning ticket and, underneath, a card with his information. He said no more words until he had his money and was walking out the door. "Talk to you soon, Miss Brooklyn," he said, giving a wink and walking out of the double doors of the grocery store. Brooklyn thought to herself, when should she call? What could he possibly do? She waited about a week before she called him. She called and got his voicemail. "Hello, you have reached the voicemail of President and owner of Tallahassee National Journal, Mike Lawson. Please leave me a brief message, and I will get back to you when I can," he said in his soft, authentic voice. Beep. Brooklyn hung up the phone quicker than you would swat a fly from your ear. She looked at the card and read it. It said the same as the voicemail. She cried in excitement, keeping this to herself. After receiving Mike Lawson's card, Brooklyn's mind was a whirlwind of hope and doubt. She carried the small, crisp piece of paper in her pocket for a week, running her thumb over the embossed letters. The card felt like a lifeline, but the thought of calling him filled her with a familiar fear of rejection. The man who had once fired her for a failed drug test, a test she was convinced was set up, was now offering a second chance. Could she trust him? Would he remember the shame of that day, or see the writer she was meant to be? She went to her brother's room, which was still her temporary home. Lying on the air mattress, she pulled out her lavender journal of memories and wrote about the encounter. This time, The tears weren't from sadness, but from a terrifying mix of gratitude and anxiety. She realized she had to take a leap of faith. She had given up everything to pursue her dreams, and she wouldn't let fear stop her again. She sat on the floor, holding her phone in her hand for an hour before finally hitting the call button. The phone rang once, then twice, before going to voicemail. Brooklyn quickly muted the phone, her heart pounding. She looked at the card again, took a deep breath, and redialed. When the beep sounded, she took another breath, cleared her throat, and spoke to the voicemail after getting no response. "Hi, Mr. Lawson," she said, her voice shaking slightly but gaining strength with each word. "This is Brooklyn McLay. I met you at the grocery store last week. I just wanted to say thank you for the kind words and for the card. I am still writing, and I have a new manuscript I'd love for you to see. I hope to hear from you." She ended the message, feeling a rush of relief and a surge of pride. The next day, her phone rang. The screen showed an unknown number, but a voice in her head told her to answer. "Hello, is this Brooklyn McLay?" The voice on the other end said. It was Mike Lawson, and he sounded even more genuine than she remembered. "I got your message. I want to apologize for the way things ended before. It was handled poorly, and you deserved better. I followed your blog for a few years, and your writing is phenomenal. I want to meet with you. Can you come to my office on Monday?" Brooklyn felt the familiar stinging of tears, this time of overwhelming gratitude. "Yes, of course," she managed to say. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Thank you so much." After the call, she went to her mom, who was sitting at the kitchen table. Her mom looked up, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "I have good news," Brooklyn said, a smile breaking across her face. "I think I finally found my way back home," she said with confidence. "What do you mean?" her mother said, confused. "Mr. Lawson, owner and president of the company I used to write for, called me for a meeting. I am praying for a second chance," she said, sitting by her mother. "Brooklyn, this is exciting news. What do you need me to do?" her mother said, grinning ear to ear, inviting her daughter to sit down. "What do you think he wants? What if it's bad? What if it's good?" Brooklyn blabbered on until her mother stepped in. "Oh, baby girl, this is only God telling you he sees you trying," her mother said, patting her on the back before walking to the kitchen to check on dinner. Brooklyn smiled and walked back to her brother's room. The next morning, at about 9 a.m., Brooklyn's phone rang from an unknown caller. With sleep crust still in her eyes and her bonnet halfway off her head, she answered the phone quickly, not even letting it get to the second ring. "Hello, this is Brooklyn McLay," she stuttered, trying to fully wake up. Sitting up in her bed, she muted the phone to clear her throat and drink water. "Hello, this is Mike Lawson. You are just the person I am looking for," he said in a soft voice. "Hey, yes, sir. I am looking forward to our meeting tomorrow," Brooklyn said, no longer shaken up but more confident. "Yes, about that, I don't need to meet." An awkward silence took over the phone. "I want you to come back on board as my writing assistant over the writing student body department," he said, hoping she heard him. The phone was still silent. "Miss McLay?" He called her name in confusion. Yes, sir. I am still here. I am just making sure you are talking to Brooklyn, the one who failed you and let you down," she said in sadness and regret. "You did not fail me. A coworker came to the board and said you smelled really loud and it bothered her. We had to go by procedure and go through with the drug test. But I am sorry I didn't fight for you. But this is your second chance. I don't care what you do, just don't let it affect your work in my company again. Do you understand?" he demanded in a stern tone. "Yes, sir, I understand, and I am truly sorry about my actions. They will not affect my job or workplace again. I respect you as a boss and writer, and I want to make you proud, Brooklyn said with more confidence than she knew she had. I'd love to hear it. You start on Monday instead. I want you to follow this couple that started dating in high school. They started a YouTube channel and want a magazine cover on them. Can you handle that for me and make it into a romantic novel, making me want to fall in love and start a channel? But I also need drama, he explained, excited knowing she was the one to call. Brooklyn instantly accepted the job. He thanked her and gave her their information to get in touch with them. She hung up the phone after thanking Mr. Lawson 10 times. She rushed to the next room to tell her mom the good news about her first assignment back at her job, reporting and creating a novel about other people. Her mother and she cried and hugged at the good news. Brooklyn told Blake. He congratulated her. Brooklyn went to a community college course for the next 2 weeks, just refreshing her writing skills. She graduated with her associate degree in journalism. She pretty much aced every class that wasn't math or science. Brooklyn didn't do any team electives. She stuck to the basics. Brooklyn's GPA was a 3.0, almost half a point less than she graduated high school with. She was just grateful she graduated. Brooklyn waited until the next month after her birthday to reach out to the couple. To her surprise, they were a couple she used to watch herself on YouTube. She was a fan, in hopes of them meeting her and her partner. Brooklyn moved to a small studio in Los Angeles to follow her writing dream. With Mr. Lawson's new location, he wanted Brooklyn to oversee while he stayed local in Tallahassee. He paid the first 6 months for Brooklyn, stating that her story should be finished and her writing paycheck would begin after Alex and her partner approved the story. Saying goodbye to her family was bittersweet. Her mother hugged her tightly, a look of pride and regret on her face. You're a star, baby girl, she whispered, a sentiment Brooklyn had longed to hear. Her brother Blake, now more of a confidant than a little brother, gave her a long embrace. Don't forget to call, he said. The preacher offered a cold, formal handshake. Live a life of calm, child, he said, but this time, his words held no power. This was a chapter in Brooklyn's life she knew her dad would be proud of. Instead of talking to him, she began to write about her stories to come. Brooklyn's new studio was small but perfect. She placed her laptop on a tiny desk by the window, a view of palm trees and sunshine, replacing the familiar black gates of her old home. She pulled out her lavender journal and began to write, not about the past, but about the future. This was a chapter her dad would be proud of, a story of her own making. She called the couple, getting the insights, characters, plot twists, etc. Brooklyn began to outline the first chapter, a narrative of a young girl named Leah on the journey of true love with her high school sweetheart, Alex. They found love in a rush, a whirlwind romance amplified by the instant fame of their social media presence. Their egos, Brooklyn wrote, pounced on their innocence like a kid on a new trampoline, each bounce higher and more reckless than the last. She described how the digital world, with its likes and comments, became their new reality, and how the authentic, simple love they shared began to crack under the pressure. She wrote about their secret fears and their public smiles, drawing from her own experience of living a perfect life for everyone else while her world shattered behind closed doors. She dramatized every feeling, every moment of conflict, pouring her soul into the characters, giving them a voice to tell the painful truths she herself was only just learning to speak. The words flowed effortlessly, a river of creativity she had been holding back for too long. For the first time, writing wasn't just a passion, it was an act of healing. She wasn't just telling a story, she was forgiving herself. The story was no longer just a narrative, it was a mirror. As she outlined the scene of Leah and Alex's egos unraveling, she realized she wasn't just writing about them. She was writing about herself, about the hollow feeling of getting everything you want and still feeling so lost. She looked out the window at the endless sprawl of the city below. In this place of new beginnings, she was ready to face the old parts of herself. The story of the high school lovers wasn't just a romance. It was a journey through the painful truths she had to confront to finally be free. She took a deep breath, and with a fresh wave of confidence, she began to write. The past was no longer a shadow to run from. It was a character to be understood. The real story she knew was about to begin. This has been Threads of the Past, written by Tanisha Ingram, narrated by Kim Pfeiffer. Copyright 2025 by Tanisha Ingram. Production copyright by Tanisha Ingram.